So what is ClickUp? ClickUp is an all-in-one productivity software where you can manage everything and anything related to your work. Your documents, your chats, your whiteboards, your projects. The value of this, you don't have to buy 5 softwares to do this. You don't have to be hopping back and forth between multiple tabs, trying to find that email from a year ago. Instead, you can find everything in a matter of seconds, keeping your work and everything related to productivity organized in a single place.
Thank you. Am I audible? Right. So good afternoon, everybody. My speakers, my audience, the people who are joining us on Zoom, and also the sponsors and the host, the CSR. Thank you very much for being with us. We're going to have a wonderful discussion, not very long one, but we'll have to be careful with our time. So let me quickly do my introduction before we go on to our speakers. So I thought a little bit about what I should say, and there's been lots said about language technology and about all sorts of things, but I want to say today that language is profoundly a human creation. It is as old as humanity, and it is a testimony to human intelligence, and I would like to emphasize human. Moreover, language is ubiquitous in our existence and our functioning within societies, and also in solving the most complex problems and challenges of our time. We in South Africa are most privileged to have many languages, official languages, and this is a diversity that I often feel we don't cherish enough. It is amazing. So, since they are so old and they are so profound and human, we have to nurture them, we have to use them, we have to develop them, we have to share them, and we have to be proud of them. So, in this amazing thing that is language, we will use and exploit the artificial, the computational, the technical, as we see fit, knowing that languages are for real. So, all our celebrated speakers, 5 of them here today, will help us now along this journey. Thank you. So I introduce my first speaker, Professor Langa Kumalu, sorry Langa for that, from Sadilar.
Thank you, my long-lost dear friend. It's good to see you, to see that you're still as strong as I last saw you. Colleagues, I have 5 minutes. 5 minutes to talk about language in the cyber infrastructure, language as a digital form. And I couldn't think of a better way of starting us off, but from a quotation that is extracted from the Digital Frontier. It's a very popular platform that discusses a lot of innovations in the digital space. And on language, this is what they said on the 1st of October. Language is intricately woven into the unique histories, cultures, and values of indigenous groups. In Africa, it tells a story, recognizes a person, and is testament to how ethnically expansive the continent is. Yet, all of these, for many of its over 3,000 ethnic groups, have become prone to absolute erosion. So the challenges out there for all of us that are working in this space to develop these languages in such a way that they can sit in the cyber infrastructure. And we know that most of these languages have no digital presence and therefore are resource scarce. And I want to draw from what Konai has described as the potential for digital language death. And in digital language death, he refers to a potential decline or disappearance of languages in the digital sphere. And the context of 4IR that is characterized by rapid technological advances presents a fresh challenge to these languages that are characterized normally as under-resourced. This is because most of this infrastructure that presents itself in the context of 4IR is dominated by English. The algorithms are in English. The software that are developed are in English. They are not supported by African languages. And so the challenge is out there for us to develop this infrastructure for African languages so that they can be used competently as languages that subsist in this cyber infrastructure. So the dominance, the hegemony of English really presents a real challenge to African languages. And therefore, Kunai really presents a very novel concept. It's a 10-year-old concept of digital ascent. How do we develop resources so that these languages can have a presence? And not just a presence, can be actively used in this infrastructure. So it's one thing for us to develop the data in such a way that the data can be findable, can be accessible, can be interoperable, and can be reusable in these various contexts. But if the speakers of these languages are not actively using these languages in the context of this digital environment, these languages still have a potential of digitally dying. So it's not enough that we have a constitution that enables us to develop all the 12 official languages. We have to develop resources on the first hand for these languages and to cultivate interest, active interest in the communities that speak these languages to actively use them in the cyber infrastructure. I always give an anecdote about my son. We moved from Durban to Potchefstroom, and he was learning isiZulu in Durban, and now he's learning either Afrikaans or Setswana in Potchefstroom. And guess what he's now competent in? Afrikaans. Why? Because it has the resources to support the learning in that environment. The Setswana, the teacher only has one textbook. It remains with her. It doesn't leave the school premises. So we need to develop resources for these African languages so that these languages can be used for posterity. We have to actively, what Kona here says, increasingly acquires a digital function and prestige, and that its speakers increasingly acquire digital skills. So we teach, we develop the resources, we teach the communities that speak these languages the competencies to use these languages via all sorts of technologies, the spelling checkers, etc., that support the use of a language in a digital space, but also actively digitally use these languages so that these languages can subsist in the cyber infrastructure. Thank you so much. Ke a leboha.
Thank you, Langa. We now give Mrs. Marlies van den Deventer of Northwest University to the podium. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. It's an absolute privilege to be here. Okay, so I was invited here. I'm a satellite manager for health sciences, directly working for the language directorate at the Northwest University. So there you can see what our logo basically is for promoting multilingualism. So it's multilingualism as a powerful resource for inclusion and academic development at the NWU. This is something that we have been working on specifically in health sciences for a very long time, for at least the last 10 years that I've been involved with them. We have fine-tuned medical terminology in various languages, and as you will see in the next slides, you will also see the work that we've been doing with some of the other universities. Now, some of the services that we render at health sciences at the Northwest University, and this is also at the other faculties as well. The privilege that we have at health sciences is that we have the buy-in of the dean. We have a lot of people seeing the need for multilingualism, especially in healthcare in South Africa, where this ultimately will be able to save lives. So what we are currently doing is we do simultaneous interpreting in classes. Now this is completely different to conference interpreting. Simultaneous interpreting is where you are basically allowed 1 to 2 seconds behind the lecturer in class. So we have a very specific technique that we use in class. So none of the other students are disturbed whilst the English students are listening to the Afrikaans lecture, but in simultaneous time, and vice versa. So where there's English lectures, the Afrikaans students will be able to then listen to their class as well. Then we do an enormous amount of translations. We feel that we are very protective when it comes to especially the translations in health sciences, because we've seen what happens when you send it to external translators. The medical terminology is a very tricky field to work in. The same terminology will not necessarily be the same or have the same meaning in midwifery than it will have, for example, in something like physiology. The meaning differs completely. So the context needs to be absolutely perfect. What happened, of course, during COVID is we started with voiceovers. So we started letting the lecturers record classes, and we did the simultaneous interpreting, but in voiceovers. That still remains. So whenever there is any kind of crisis on campus, like, for example, in the beginning of the year, as Prof. Langa will also know, we had a bit of a water crisis on campus. So all of the students were asked to please go home for 2 weeks. None of the health science students fell behind in their classes because they were still being able to use the Zoom classes and the voiceovers that we were providing them. Then we also did screencast-o-matic classes. We do hosting of multilingual online classes, live simultaneous interpreting and Zoom streaming of specifically pharmaceutical lectures and pharmaceutical symposiums like we did 2 weeks ago. And then also recording and dubbing of online classes and uploading of material to our platform. Now, it used to be Ufundi. Prof. Langa, if you will help me, I think it's going over to Blackboard. So in the new year, it'll be, we have a new student platform where these classes will then also be able to be put onto that platform for the students, so they will not miss out on anything. Just a quick overview of interpreted hours and then also translations done. Now, there you can see myself there at the top. It's 108 hours for the first semester and 93 hours for the second semester. So you can just more or less get an idea of the average that we are currently doing. So in total, the interpreting department does round about 800 modules across the campus. All right, then just to quickly summarize, the pharmaceutical board sees interpreting in such an important fashion that one of the interpreters that we trained, that was in my classes, they saw her interpreting hours as the same as clinical hours. And she is currently doing her community service here at the Chris Barnard Hospital. So we are extremely proud of her. And there you can just see in 2022, we developed multilingual cards for nursing sciences students. I'm just going to quickly fast forward there. We also developed a pilot project. We just launched an app with pharmacy, multilingual app that the students can use whenever they go into communities to help them directly interpret what they are asking the patients. And then we also developed cards for the communities that don't have access to multimedia. It's these cards. We did this in collaboration with the University of Salamanca in Spain. And there you can basically see it's Afrikaans, English, and Setswana, as well as Sesotho, where they have the mommies and the babies, or mommies with new babies, can explain to the healthcare practitioner exactly what it is that they need. Because we are losing patients, we are losing lives because of a break in communication. So this works. Right, and that is just in short. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marlies. So our next speaker is Dr. Biandri Hubert from Wits.
use this to move forward. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's always lovely to be at a SADILA event, and I'm glad to be here today. Thank you for having me. So today I'll speak briefly about the intersection of language and the law from my perspective and my research. Language is critical in my research, which focuses on a field of international trade law known as sanitary and phytosanitary measures, or SPS. If you don't know what that is, don't worry too much. Most people in law don't really interact with that much either. This is an area where the precision of terminology, the specificity of language, and the way words are applied can make a world of difference for an individual involved in regional or international trade. I focus specifically on national legislation's role as a translator of rights, a translator of obligations and principles into practical meaning for traders. So practical meaning for, sorry, this isn't moving, but yeah, I'll just use this. Yeah, no worries. In this field, law interacts closely with science, economics, and the political environment that shape international trade. My work emphasizes language's contribution primarily to legal certainty. There are a couple of other things as well, but legal certainty is the main one. I also emphasize its role in ensuring that laws can be practically applied and the accessibility of legislation. I focus on the creation of measures being done within the scope of the enabling legislation, which means that there must be a legal basis for the regulations or measures applied to science-based import and export requirements for agricultural products. Those affected by legislation should be able to access their rights, obligations, and compliance requirements clearly, and I consider language's role in the creation of non-tariff related barriers to international trade, which relates closely to the legal certainty or lack thereof that the language of legislation either provides or does not provide. To explore this further, I often use computational tools. Most recently, that has been a computational analysis using R. R programming, or programming tools in general, offer a different perspective on the role of language in law, and I focus on law in South Africa in particular. One project I've undertaken involved comparing the legislative frameworks of 14 African countries in my specific field. Using computational methods has allowed me to analyze these frameworks more objectively than what traditional approaches, at least in the context I was doing it, would have allowed. I focus solely on the presence or absence of field-specific terms used. This also is also a means to identify field-specific legislation. So in a field-specific or term-specific field, if the word's not there, doesn't matter if that legislation loosely touches on agriculture, it is not specific legislation and is therefore unable in any case to achieve the stated purpose if the correct terminology is not being used. So the specific research is powerful in terms of identifying and communicating the extensive gaps in frameworks, and the use and other uses of computation tools are, for example, how terms and phrases interact. These aren't specific uses that I've used yet, but definitely something in the future. In a field as term-specific as mine, using the correct terms with a clear understanding is non-negotiable. So whether it's rights, obligations, or principles, language defines the scope and the meaning. At a recent interdisciplinary conference I was at, I was reminded about the role that language plays in law, particularly in communicating the application of law. So a participant simply asked the audience, what can I, as someone in the industry, practically do with this research that you have presented to improve my position? And this has been bothering me for a couple of weeks now, because at this particular conference and at most conferences I've attended this year, we haven't been very good at communicating practically what you can do or how this benefits the individual sitting in that room. This happened to be interdisciplinary, so I was faced by ranchers, I was faced by farmers, that type of participant that really held us accountable. So the challenges that I have highlighted in the field of legal research are not isolated problems. Perhaps there's even more of an advantage to being in a field such as mine, where the terms are so highly specific. It may be more of a challenge in the application of legal fields where multiple terms can have similar or equal meaning, whereas in my case, it doesn't. Limitations for me specifically, or myself personally, is I only speak English and I speak Afrikaans with an accent because I'm a Zimbabwean. And so my ability to communicate my research further is limited to either English or Afrikaans. And I think that's where spaces like this become incredibly beneficial, where there are multiple people with the required expertise to help communicate research outcomes, research purposes or intentions into multiple languages and store them digitally with Sadila. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Biandri. So now, our next speaker, second last speaker, is Mr. Soli Nisi. And he is from DSAC.
Thank you, Prof. Can you put it up for you, sir? All right, thank you. It's that one, yes. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I've been pre-warned that my presentation is very interesting, but unfortunately, the time is not enough. So I'll be talking from the heart because I'm very passionate about what I'm doing. I've been doing this for many years. Obviously, if you look at a country like South Africa, we all know that in terms of language legislation, we do have the Constitution, we have the Use of Official Languages Act. There are other many prescripts, like you look into the language in education policy, the language policy in higher education. If you go through all this legislation or acts, you'll realize that they all complement each other and they all speak to each other in terms of what we need to do as a country in terms of the development of our languages. Obviously, it's an obvious case that we do really need specialized terminology so that we can communicate exactly. We are all professionals and experts in different fields. One of the biggest challenges that I can share with you when it comes to language, everybody is busy with his or her own specialty, but when it comes to getting people together so that maybe they can assist in the development of concepts, new concepts in technology, in science, in maths and other areas, they will tell you that they don't have the time to do that, which is the most unfortunate part. Specialized terminologies, they assist us to communicate exactly. They assist us to save time in terms of when we translate documents, because making use of the available tools that are there in the market, I'm happy Prof. Langa is here with us. They've assisted the department in the development of quite a number of softwares that we use for terminology, translation, softwares as the terminology management system, the ITE, Omega T, Ochumato ITE and Omega T. Those softwares are very helpful because once you use them, you are sure that they have got a memory on the background. They will save the information that you have already done so that next time when you are confronted with a similar assignment, you don't have to go back and redo everything because everything is already loaded in the memory. So obviously, in conclusion, as we are gathered here today, I would like to say that we really need specialized terminology. You might be an expert in law, you might be an expert in the medical field or any other field. The field that you are practicing in actually sort of determines the type of terminology that you need. Think of banking, the what you call the terminology that we are all using for banking. We all talk of an ATM, we all talk of a PIN. If you ask other people what is a PIN, they cannot even give you the full name of a PIN or an ATM. But because we are all consumers of the same systems, we are all used to the same terminology. And it makes our lives much easier so that we can transact, we can communicate, and do all sorts of things in a way that simplifies our lives. all of us here, we use gadgets. Those gadgets, for us to communicate, we need terminology. The most important thing that we need to do is to make sure that when it comes to the development of our languages, we use those gadgets in our own languages so that they can have that memory and sort of help to minimize the underdevelopment of the historically marginalized languages. I think I should end my talk here because I can talk the whole day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Soli. So the last speaker that I'd like to introduce is Mr. Nsuku Pius Ntileni from Pansalp. Please, thank you.
Program Director, thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Nsuku Mtileni. You are not the first one. A lot of people have difficulty in pronouncing this name. Others say Pius, others say Pias, but the correct pronunciation is Pius. I'm from the Pan-South African Language Board. I've also received the same warning about time, so I'll be mindful of my time. I also find difficulty in pronouncing this name of this scholar, the first one here. So it's not my name only. This scholar, in an effort to make us understand what standardization is, says it is the process by which a language has been codified in some way. That process usually involves the development of such things as grammars, spelling books, and dictionaries, and possibly a literature. Milroy J. and Milroy L. support this scholar by saying it is the process of consciously maintaining, if necessary, by government. This is where Pansalp comes in. By government intervention, a particular form of a language in a population where there is linguistic diversity wide enough to make communication difficult. The process of standardization. Durant in 1997 says, the creation of national states forces standardization. The process of state formation creates the condition for a unified linguistic market where one linguistic variety acquires the status of language, or rather of standard language. Colleagues, this points out and suggests that the national state is responsible to undertake standardization. In the South African context, the national state would be government. Pansalp Act 59 of 1995 supports this by saying that Pansalp is responsible for the creation, for the conditions, for the development and other things of all South African official languages. The process of standardization. The written form of any language the written form of any language around the globe has its own orthography and spelling rules. This is Feingen 1994. These rules of orthography and spelling leads to what is generally known as standardization, Chikota 2016 and Feingen 2008. At the Pan-South African Language Board, currently we have the spelling and orthography rules, and currently we have the 2019 version. According to Holmes 2013, standardization involves 4 steps, namely selection of code, codification, elaboration of function, and lastly acceptance. And the nitty-gritties of what is involved in each of these steps is a discussion for another day. In the interest of time, colleagues, allow me to go to the process of verification and authentication. The Pan-South African Language Board, through its advisory structures, national language bodies, is responsible for the verification and authentication of terminology for public use. Verification is the first and is undertaken by the Terminology and Lexicography Technical Committees of national language bodies. They are responsible for verifying terms, checking them against spelling and orthography rules, as well as other reference material. This technical committee comprises of experienced people in terminology development within the NLBs. During this process, a subject specialist from the client has to be present to clarify and give contextual direction where needed. Authentication is the second and the final phase and is undertaken by the entire national language body concerned. Remember that verification is only undertaken by a technical committee of the NLB. The convener of the Technical Committee for Verification will present a detailed report from the verification indicating major challenges that the committee has encountered during the process. The Technical Committee refers the challenging terms to the NLB for further decision and approval. The national language bodies, NLBs, are the final quality control for standardization and language-related matters. A final report for authenticated terms is signed off by the chairperson of the NLBs, certifying the verification and authentication processes, and this gives the client the go-ahead to publish the terminology for public use. Thank you very much. I think I also stick to my time.
Thank you very much, Pius. So we've come to the end of the presentations of our panel. The program says that I have to do a summary and then we'll go into questions and answers. So I decided to keep my summary short. Just a one-liner, and then we'd rather go into giving the audience, the other people that have joined us, a chance to talk to us and ask questions to the panel. So my summary is very, I'd say, high level, somehow maybe vague, but I want to say this. Language occupies, as I said before, all spaces where we function. So we've had Langa talking about the digital space, which we cannot ignore and is becoming more and more important, and that's also the field that I work in. Language technology is my field, so I'm absolutely passionate about that, and I really feel that even languages that have no space at any other place or platform, they can still be in the digital space. Then we had Marlies, who spoke to us about the human in the loop. The human that is confronted with more than one language. Languages which they often don't understand and which somehow complicates important, essential human communication. And we've been impressed by all the things that you've been doing in the health domain, which is one of the really important domains in our country specifically. And so we had a sense of what you're using in terms of technology available to you. Of course, I think there's much more that we can do in terms of more automation and more languages and more technical and computational support, but that's a story for another day. Then we had the legal domain, which is very interesting for me because it classifies as a controlled environment. Language is very specific. The phrasings are very important and specific. So that has become known as a controlled environment for using language, and which I think is very, very suitable for automation, for computation, for grammars, and for all sorts of ways of using language technology even to improve that. So thank you very much for introducing us to your work, and I'd like to talk to you as well afterwards. Then we come to two very important things that language technology people are very, very passionate about, and that is terminology and standardization. So we talked about how we make new terms. How do we talk about things if we don't agree on what to call them? And it's a huge problem in language technology to not to have words to say things specific. In the sciences, since we're here for the science forum and we are talking about science, this is a huge field, and I might say very time-consuming and quite complicated. And then standardization, of course, ties closely to that, because we want to know what is right and what is wrong. And if you start using words that aren't correct, or if everybody starts using different words for things, then there's a breakdown in communication. So this whole thing of standardization is not about putting language into boxes and restricting them, but it's sort of helping them to make the best of this interface between creativity and growth, and using terms that make us understand each other. And I think that's what's been captured by our audience very well. Thank you very much. And at this point, I'd like to open the floor for questions, and I'd like to ask you to let us go one question to each panelist as we go along, so that we give everybody a chance. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to ask if there's anybody who wants to ask Professor Khumalo a question or a comment on what he said. Karen, thank you.
Professor Khumalo, thank you very much for a very interesting talk. It's so nice to be in a language room again, in a room talking about languages. Something that just struck me during your talk is that we often only reference language policies and policies for the higher education institutions, university language policies and so. But I think that there is a broader context as well. If we look at things like DCDT's ICT and Digital Economy Master Plan, language is very integral to that, ensuring that how we guide organizations to communicate and to deliver services to our citizens and foreigners for that matter in their languages of preference to make things accessible is really very critical. I see DPSA has recently also published a national digital and future skills strategy. And if we look at the DSTI itself, the decadal plan, future skills development is critical. It's pivotal in that. It's one of the pillars. And I do not think that we are going to develop a literate and skilled workforce if we don't enable access and learning in our local languages, because that's where the foundation is laid. And also if we don't enable our African language speaking citizens to actually participate in the digital economy. So those are just comments on your talk, but once again, thank you very much.
You want me to comment on a comment? Indeed. Thanks, Karen, for that. Very instructive, very important. I have said at the DISAC Language Forum, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, Solly, I have said that I don't know a country, or maybe in Africa, that's the default culture, but I don't know of a well-developed country that doesn't take language as a national system of planning, or in its national system of planning. You mentioned a couple of policies. We are very eclectic in our approaches. We haven't had a very coherent national policy that actually articulates the use of language from the mundane to the most complex, from basic education to higher education, across all spheres of life and in real sense. And I'm talking technology, economy, law, medical sciences, etc. We haven't had a coherent policy that articulates all that. And at the center of all that, language playing a very central and well-defined role. We need that. We need that framework. We need that implementation structure so that each citizen can participate actively and in their language, in the development and in the true development of their country, and in this case of South Africa. So we really need to have that conversation, Solly, and I'm talking to Pantalp as well, so that if we have a national policy, a national language policy, all these tributaries, and I call them tributaries because they need to feed into this national policy. All this basic education policy, now we have MTBPE framework that seeks to do the same thing that we've been aspiring for. But again, look at it. It's happening in some corner and we don't even see how it is going to affect other spaces as well. So thank you so much, Karen, for those. The decadal plan, it's an excellent document, but it needs to articulate again the role of language in all this. so that we can actually bring to the fore that everything, as you put it, Prof. Lorette, that language embeds everything. Language is it organizes our thoughts. It spurs us to innovate. It is everything to a human being. And therefore, we must actually put it at the center of all that we plan for the nation and for the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Longa, for a most inspiring, and Karen for a very good question. Now we are over to Marlies. Anybody who wants to comment on what she's been telling us about?
Thank you, Chair. But I'm not sure if I'm going to be relevant to Marlies because I wasn't here when Marlies spoke, because I just wanted to dovetail on the role of language. I work for the Department of Science and Technology and Innovation, and in the Indigenous Knowledge Systems Unit, and we are trying to implement the 2004 Indigenous Knowledge Systems Policy and coupled with the 2019 IK Act. So the project that I am working on for the past decade, we work with communities across South Africa, and definitely one of our core mandates, we record their indigenous languages because we're trying to establish an IK registration system whereby communities using their indigenous language. Now we're doing, we documenting African traditional medicine and the indigenous food. Because in Brazil and China and India, they've well developed their systems using their indigenous languages. So, but then we don't involve PenSlab to standardize their language because we believe that knowledge, especially with indigenous knowledge, is within context. For example, I'm a Motswana. When we say a tree is a tlhare, and in English, when they say medicine is medicine. So in that case, there's no way that you can say you standardize this. Hence now, we need is the raw data from the community so that when the industry and the other people from the other Western world, when they capture, when they access that knowledge, it's sort of intellectual protection for our people because they use their own language. And then, yeah, we do have other process where in the medicine we take them to the lab to see the toxicity of what they're using, African ginger, what it cures. But at the same time, we do maintain, and that's how the recording works. In Northern Cape, if they speak Ngqu, we record it Ngqu. Yes, the program now, in terms of who's doing that, where did you get the knowledge, obviously it's in English. But the know-how, the protection knowledge is done in indigenous languages. So I just wanted to say that there is some efforts as from the Department of Science and Technology and Innovation that we are doing to preserve those indigenous languages in their own mother tongue. So as a born and bred Pretoria, I cannot record knowledge in Chivenda. We hire people from Venda who are the original people there. They record the knowledge in Chivenda. But we don't verify the language per se, that if the old man or the old lady saying, I'm using this medicine to cure 1, 2, 3 because it has been used by my forefathers, we grow this tree at this time, that we respect them as it is because it's been working, and then we can take them to the coach lab to develop medicines. Then where the science, the natural science come in is when they take the medicine to check for the toxicities and the pH level and anything like that, that the Western science is teaching us this is the way to go. But we're still very decolonizing this language that it should be inboxed because it cannot be standardized because the context is different. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Marlies, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much. That's very insightful. What I would like to just basically contribute to that is we started with the card project that I discussed previously in 2022. There you can see some of the cards. Now, this cards started out as a project specifically only for pharmacy and nursing sciences students, where they go into deep rural communities, because in the Northwest, where do we place our students for their community hours? Not even just community hours, for their practical hours, for that matter. We are talking about deep rural places like Gelukspang, places you've never even heard about, I promise you. It's, you'll be lucky to have cell phone access there. So what we did is we went and we sat down with medical practitioners and students, and then also people from the community themselves. And what we did is we started developing cards that ask very, very specific questions in terms of, are you using something with your ARVs? Are you have to realize that you have to take this tablet once a day, not twice a day, because it can be fatal. Very, very specific things. And that became such a big success that we ended up working with a company called Ambani. Now, Ambani they are working more on a school level, but what they do is they teach all of the 11 languages, not sign language as yet, but the 11 languages they are teaching to pupils in a very fun, academic kind of way. So you're welcome to go and take a look at their website. So then we went together with Ambani and we developed our own health sciences app called Sinapi. Now, Sinapi, if you translate that to Greek, means mustard seed, because this is basically where things are starting now for us. It's a mustard seed, and we are having faith as small as a mustard seed at this point. So the app was launched now in August, and at this point it is the pharmacy students using it in the hospitals. Next year it will be promoted to all of the other schools in health sciences as well, and then hopefully by 2028, when the Northwest University launches its own medical school, then it will be fully functional. Now, what this app does is it works on multi-levels. It's not only pictures, because we use the pictograms specifically for people who cannot read, so that they can understand, so that they can, when the medical practitioner is with them, they can show them the picture and they can acknowledge, oh, okay, yes, that is what I need to know about. And then the medical practitioner can use either the 4 languages that we currently have on there, which is Afrikaans, English, Setswana, and Sesotho. Next year we are building on isiZulu, because the Northwest University has seen a tremendous growth in isiZulu students. Or they can even use, we have QR codes that can read it to you. So even if the medical practitioner struggles to speak with their patient, they can scan the QR code, and the QR code will read it back to them. And we've taken all of these cards and we've built it into an app that currently has about 1,000 to 1,200 terminologies. Then on top of that, what we've done is we are working with the University of Salamanca in Spain, University of Groningen, Trinity College, UWC, Rhodes, and UKZN to build a multilingual repository. It's called Polakelu. You can go and Google that as well. Polakelu. Polakelu. So that is Polekole. Polakelu. Oh, sorry, L-O. L-O, yes. My apologies. Yeah, Polakelu. All right, so what we do there is it is a free online repository where all of the universities that I've just mentioned work together to put terminology, and I'm not just talking about medical terminology, I'm talking about all of the faculties that you can possibly think of. We've got humanities, we've got engineering sciences, we've got health sciences, we've got education. So we are building on very, very specific terminology that we use only after we have collaborated with people in the community as well, because we know how sensitive terminology can be in a community. And I think, yes, the emphasis was now on health sciences, because when I did my article in April at the University of Salamanca, in that very specific time period, and this was not even in South Africa, this was in, I'm just trying to think, this was in Belgium, where 2 patients was admitted. The one was admitted for a checkup, a sonography checkup for pregnancy. The other one was scheduled for the termination. Okay, they swapped the 2 patients. And that was simply because of a lack of communication. So that is how important this is in health sciences. If I think in terms of, and I really want to emphasize this, we are also working on sign language a lot, because what we've seen happen in clinics specifically is where we have our deaf patients coming in. They might be in labor. They have no idea of communicating. If the patient is deaf mute, how are they communicating? How is the medical practitioner telling them to bear down when they have to stop when they have to breathe when they have to? They don't understand. So what happens? That patient goes into stress, they shut down, body shuts down, patient dies, baby dies. And this is a true story, this is facts. So that is why we are so passionate about specifically health sciences. But like I said, please do go and visit the Polokelo website, and then you'll find, a vast array of terminology there that you can take a look at. You're most welcome. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Marlies. Now, is there any question for Biandri? Please, yes, please.
Marlies, your repository is really interesting, and I think potentially a place in which legal terms can also be uploaded, unless you already have some. Okay, that's very cool. Yeah, that was my comment.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
So my question would be that I presume that you use English mainly, and all the tools that are available for English. So the moment that the legal discourse goes into another language, have you been involved in any other languages, or is there a need for having this kind of support in other languages, or what is the situation?
I can't say that academically I've had any experience with that, but practically, for example, at a border post, which is typically where my field of law plays out, either an agricultural product can cross the border or it can't. Either it's crossing legally or it's not. Either it's got a permit or it doesn't. And I think, at least my opinion is that a lot of the barriers faced in understanding between perhaps a customs inspector or sanitary or phytosanitary inspector and the person trying to export or import this particular product is sometimes simply the words that we're using to describe the product, to describe the risk related to that product, and to describe perhaps the importance of having a permit, that it's not simply something that exists for bureaucratic purposes, but that it serves a scientific purpose. So that is kind of what I try to get at as well with the research that I do within the legislation, is if we don't have legislation that is enabling, in the sense that it's fully empowered to make regulations and that type of thing that are clear, that aren't coming out of thin air, then we're going to, at a practical level, incur more problems such as this, where legal certainty at its most complicated is already unsure of what to do with the situation, whereas trying to explain in a practical kind of situation at a border post or at a quarantine station or wherever it might be, a research laboratory where maximum residues are being tested or that type of thing, we run into problems by not using the correct words.
Thank you. Hi, Soli. So I'm going to open the floor for questions to Soli.
Thank you. It's not specifically for Soli Prof. I just wanted to make a general comment. The first one is, thank you for the sign language interpreter. I think this is amazing. I think it should happen regularly. And secondly, I would appreciate it if the lady from DSTI to form part of the panel next year, because I think she spoke brilliantly about what they do in there. And I say this because I was recently in Lesotho, and so I get on to Thaba Bosiu very rich history of Basotho because I'm a Mosotho. And so there's a specific patch of the mountain that is different from all the other parts of the mountain. So what comes to my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so I'm talking to our guide to say maybe an asteroid hit this part of the mountain. He asked me what is an asteroid. Now I'm at pains to try and explain this in Sesotho. Now had I known that the STI addresses issues like that, I probably would have been in a better position to explain to him. Because I left there knowing for sure that I was not able to do justice to say what that means, And also, Marilise, I also wanted to acknowledge the work that you are doing. Thank you very much for that. As a custodian of traditions and customs in my family, so I do research, right, about my clan. And I normally go to repositories from varsities, and I want information in Sesotho, not English translated in Sesotho, because I think there's a difficulty in trying to explain African concepts, traditions, and cultures using Western language. A lot is lost in translation. So when I hear you say there's more of that, it encourages me, and I just want to say thank you very much. Thanks, Prof.
Karen, did you put up your hand? Thank you.
If I may, by finger. Not showing you the phone. I've got a trick question for you, Solly.
Yes.
I think what is amazing about this discussion is that we have heard from indigenous knowledge, law, health, policy, so many different standardization, so many different aspects, and it all comes down to terminology. And what has struck me in this conversation is that while we do standardization and verification of terminology, and we capture that in terminology lists and so on, there is a lot of indigenous knowledge that shouldn't be standardized, that should just be captured and made available, because that thing of language death is very real. And I think that knowledge, if we don't do something now, we said this, sorry, I'm going to give we said this 20 years ago, and we're still saying this, and I don't think that we've made enough progress personally. But my trick question to you is, how do we encourage communities to become involved in sharing the terminology that they are using, the words that they are creating? Language is alive, right? It's living, it's a thing that changes all the time. How do we get them to contribute what terms they are developing, and how do we get that to feed into the NLUs and NLB processes so that it becomes part of our documented language? Because at this stage we might be artificially creating terminology, whereas such already exists. So that's why I said it's a trick question, it's a difficult question, and I don't expect you to have an answer. But because it's something we've been talking about for a long time. But can we start thinking about how to create a platform to do that? Thanks.
No, thank you very much. And you have captured it well. Actually, I wanted to make a comment to the colleague from Science and Innovation earlier on, that at a time when the project, the Indigenous Knowledge Systems project was started, Science and Technology was still part of our department. And I don't know how it came about that. I don't even know how we lost them in the process, because I don't foresee them doing that project on their own without us. And one more thing that I want to mention, colleagues, as we are gathered here, I agree with you, Karen, in terms of the type of language that we are developing here currently. It's more artificial, because if you look back, we had a lot of indigenous knowledge that used to be there in our communities. And it's all upon us here now to go back to those communities and tap into those indigenous knowledge systems and make sure that the knowledge is preserved in such a way that it's there forever. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves doing the same thing over and over again. It's very painful to see this happening. And one of the most difficult things that we find ourselves in, there are a lot of projects happening across the country, people doing projects in their little corners and stuff like that. The space that I find myself in, it's how do we create a platform where we can put all this information together. Prof. Kumalo is here. We have been trying, Prof. I think with your assistance, we need to really find a way of making sure that a repository, it's sort of developed that will sort of cover all the language work that is happening across the country. Otherwise, we are just fighting a losing battle. Thank you.
Sorry, I want the mic now, please.
Can I quickly add on that?
Yeah,
Sorry, quickly.
Sorry, so I just want to see that 20 years ago, the tunnel was extremely dark. Now there's a little bit of light. We have to acknowledge the fact that languages were suppressed by politics. So, and this flowed into our communities as well. Children were told, you go and you learn in English. Forget about your indigenous languages. So what? And that is why we see it dying. But it is reliving now. We are definitely seeing that. The interesting thing is this is not just a problem in South Africa. That is why the University of Salamanca is on board with this project, as well as Groningen, and especially Dublin College. They are seeing Gaelic Irish dying, and they're trying to bring that back into the universities, and they are being successful in that. And that is why they are also assisting in this, because they also don't want to see their indigenous languages dying, which is happening. So this is a very interesting thing, but it's also a worldwide thing. And something that we are doing currently at the university, and this is the reason why I'm saying that I'm seeing a little bit of light, is we have a multilingual pedagogy online course that we do for lecturers. And one of the modules that I cover with interpreting and translating is pharmaceutical research. And the students are being asked to please hand in their research studies in their indigenous language. And we've had quite a few so far. And that to me is brilliant, because in the past, nobody participated. So it wouldn't be read. Now they are seeing the effort being put in from our side. So now the lecturers that actually did the multilingual pedagogies, when they go into research methodology, they ask the students, please, when you insert when you hand in your research, do it in your language, and they're doing it, and that is wonderful.
Thank you, Marilise. So that's a very good point, and I support that. But there is a platform. There's a platform, Wikipedia. And Wikipedia has a terminology platform called Wikidata. And we've been advocating for decades now, Langar, that anybody can write an article on any topic in their language on Wikipedia. There is no reason why any little statement of indigenous knowledge has to go away or disappear. It is the responsibility of the owner of that knowledge to sit down, write a Wikipedia article. Anybody can contribute. We've had workshops, we've done lots of stuff. We can do another one, so that people have a voice and they can write an article, they can expose their content, they can expose their terminology, they can share whatever knowledge they want. And we've been saying that for indigenous knowledge, and the Wikipedia is very Eurocentric, very English-centric. But the people who write in English are English. And the reason why our Wikipedias are very small is because we don't write. The languages, the African languages, don't care to write articles on Wikipedia. So let me say there is a platform, even if it's not perfect, but it is a plate. And the other very important thing is anybody, any single person can contribute. Nobody's excluded.
I was actually going to speak before her, but you know, she's been doing this for the longest time now. I want to piggyback on what you've just said, because I think my communications manager wanted to say the same thing. So maybe I should disclose that I am from Sadila, and I had Sadila. And Sadila did something very novel in trying to really kickstart what Wikipedia has been really trying to ignite for the longest time. We got into a partnership with Wikipedia South Africa and PANSAP in a project called SWEEP. And I would really love for you to go downstairs to our stand. It's very good as well. It looks really good, and I'm very proud of my staff. They will tell you more about the SWEEP project, but what is happening in the SWEEP project is we targeted a language that didn't even have any presence on Wikipedia. It's Indebele. We formally launched it at UNISA, and we set out to drive training in content development on Wikipedia. We incubated that those contributions, developing materials, editing them on Wikipedia, and now we have a growing competence in isiNdebele on articles that now subsist in the wikis, and isiNdebele now has presence on Wikipedia. Didn't exist 10 months ago. Now it actually short-circuited some of the incubation processes because of the high volumes of texts that were being developed. And Loretta is right. You can actually cover every single topic of any complexity or simplicity, depth, cultural depth, or whatever, and just publish it on Wikipedia, and people will have the knowledge that you've shared. What we've done within the context of the SWEEP is not just target the Ndebele speakers, but also to go to universities to say, can you generate not cultural text, not IKS talks, text, but also your subject text. If you're a pharmacist, why don't you write your whole lecture series in isiNdebele or isiZulu or whatever, so that all of that knowledge has presence. Remember, I spoke about digital asset. This is actually how you can have footprint on the cyber infrastructure, if you can actually share in your language. And by the way, on wikis, if we see that there are certain things that are factually incorrect, we will edit your article. And the factual correctness will depend on how active that language community or language scientific community is on the Wikipedia. I think 25 years ago, we didn't want our kids to go to Wikipedia to go and get information. But now, it is very instructive for you to get information on wikis. It is very, very scientifically instructive for you to do that. We need for us, and we have started this in a big way at Sadila, for us to have languages to have this footprint. And by the way, the large language models, they are neural driven. If they don't find any information out there, they will come back with the dumbest answer. In fact, they will hallucinate because they can't say, oh, I don't know anything. They will go and find something and then just give you a hallucination. So we need for us to develop knowledge. We are the knowledge generators in our own mother tongues. And the more we have out there, the more of these LLMs become more intelligent. We are the ones that can make them intelligent. So we need that digital asset. And we are going to drive that digital asset with the speakers of these languages. So Soli, you have comrades full of the left the room. We will develop that. It's a public, Wikipedia is a public repository. So it's there. We don't even need to look for one repository. It's already there. And English dominates because English is active. But there's nothing that stops isiZulu from being active in the Wikipedia. Afrikaans is actually very, very, very active on the wikis, if you look at the stats.
Thank you, Langa. So just to say, do a little pitch for Wikidata, which I said was the terminology platform that underpins the knowledge graph of terms and definitions and all sorts of important information that underpin all the Wikimedia projects, including Wikipedia. So there is a project that we have with at CSIR to develop Wikidata entries for isiZulu, which is funded by the Wikimedia Foundation internationally. So there are little things happening, but there are ways and means, and that we have to take them. Right now, the final speaker, Pius. Please, Pius. I'm going to ask people to ask you very difficult questions. Anybody for Pius?
Prof, I think we had a question over here from this lady.
For Pius.
Oh no, it wasn't for Pius.
Can we just quickly have a question for Pius, and then we go to this other question? Karen, thank you.
I'm dominating. I've got a very dominating person. Karen Kelter, CSR, by the way, if you don't know by now. Pius, where can one get hold of the terminology that has been standardized by the NLBs?
Thank you very much. When a terminology is verified and authenticated by the NLB, such is a request of a client to PenSalb. For an example, if the South African Reserve Bank approaches PenSalb to say, we have a terminology list, can you please verify and authenticate it? The PenSalb does the work, and thereafter PenSalb returns the work to the client and say, we have verified and authenticated, and you can print and publish for public use.
May I ask a follow-up question? Does such a client remunerate PenSalb for developing that technology?
The financial implications that are that exist between in the process of verification and authentication is such that the client is responsible for financing the verification, that is paying for the sitting fee of the NLBs, and then with authentication, PenSalb takes all the financial strain.
So with PenSalb being funded by government, isn't it government IP?
It's a constitutional body.
Yes. Paid for by taxpayers' money?
Correct.
So I'll ask the lawyer. The lawyer is shaking her head. Just asking, because my concern is that what we are doing is we're creating additional pockets of terminology that's not being reused. And that is, I think, a very problematic model, and maybe it's something that one should talk about a bit. I don't know. Just a question, remark, not just a comment.
Because it's a very good question, and I know that PenSalb has this statutory function, and that the sitting fees for the verification are borne by the client. And I've used PenSalb a lot, and I've borne a lot of. It's very expensive to pay for your sitting fees, especially if you're dealing with more than one language. But what we actually did when I was at UKZN is that all the terms were made public. They are sitting in a terminology bank that is accessible online. Why would the Reserve Bank keep the terms away from the public domain if a public institution was part of creating that terminology? Because surely it's not necessarily confined to the Reserve Bank use. It could actually be relevant to other economic programs in our universities, in our tertiary institutions. So why is PANSAB not saying, we did this, we have signed this for your use, but we will retain a copy that we are going to make public, or that we're going to put in a public repository, so that the client, as you put them, get their product, because you're using a commercial, the client, and get their product, but then the public also profits from because it's a resource. Terminology is a resource, and we need these resources for us to teach these courses, to transact using some of these terms. So surely they are a huge resource, but and then your client takes what they have paid for in part, though, because they don't pay for authentication, right?
Yes, thank you very much. I would love to confirm that indeed and in fact the client doesn't pay for authentication. It's fully funded by the Pan South African Language Board. You know, I'm a very simple and concise person. I just want us to direct our eyes to the last sentence there. So the terminology is not only confined for use by the client, but also there is no legislation, there is nothing that prohibits PANSAB from publishing the terminology, or even the client from publishing the terminology for public use. Thank you very much.
That's very good news.
That's good news, yes.
Very, very good. Very good news. Very.
So last question. Does it mean those terms that we can't find publicly, we can actually approach PANSAB and say, we know you authenticated X, Y, and Z, can we have it? And then we can have it published.
Anything that we do in South Africa, as much as we are a free country, it must be backed by the constitution or by the legislations. And there is no such legislation that restricts us from giving you such information. As a matter of fact, it's a public good.
Thanks, Pius. We had a question from the floor.
Thank you. It's not really a question, but on an answer that adds on to the platforms that are available out there that pull in the communities to contribute to the knowledge. And I know the gentleman spoke about not being able, he was in Lesotho and whatnot. The University of the Free State, in collaboration with the University of Lesotho, have an African languages press that is specifically there available to allow the community to contribute and throw in any publication or any knowledge that just to make sure that they collect all the rich culture of Lesotho. You can tell a story, you can do your research, and you can publish on that platform. It's a more formal, platform. You can even sell your books, your poetry, and everything that all the knowledge that it's indigenous to the Sotho people. So another academic libraries are very good spaces to launch such things because they have the skills of research data management and whatnot. So the platforms are there. I just think the issue lies in utilization. It's underutilized. And then it's just a question for Prof. Langa, but if I see him around, I'll ask him on the side. But it's more to do with African languages and AI. But yeah, as we I feel like we're getting left behind as African languages. We are on the 5IR now. Where are we? So yes, we develop these technologies to collect indigenous knowledges, but the more technology moves ahead, the more the African languages stay behind. How do we move ourselves closer?
There's a lot of activity in AI. I I really think that we are moving a lot. I'll give you 2 examples. There's Lelapa AI. Vukosi is doing fantastic work at UP. There's Shakai. I don't know whether you're familiar with Shakai, an amazing AI system that can also generate terminology on the go for some disciplines, and also assist in assessment. So you can actually structure your lecture in isiZulu and also ask for the same system to actually do your assessment. So yes, we are making progress on in AI in African languages. Not all of them, because again the data is scant, because AI really depends on resources, on language resources. So the isiZulu and isiXhosa are doing very well because the data is out there. isiZulu is amazing because really they have lots and lots of digital data. They have 4 newspapers, I think, that really is good for isiZulu. But yeah, there is progress. We need to link up, because both of them, I think, are part proprietary. We need a public system, but it's very expensive. LLMs are very, very expensive, really, really expensive. Yeah.
Thank you, Langa, for that very important comment. I focused my introduction on the human intelligence, but of course with the idea that people will ask, what is going on in terms of artificial intelligence? And and I agree with you, the more people write in their languages, the more data there will be and the better the artificial intelligence will become. So there is no way of sidestepping human intelligence. So people write down what you know in your language in the best way you can and put it out there. AI will find it. Right, so it's now 14:29. Is there a question or a comment or anything?
I think I'll have the last question.
Good.
I'll direct this one to my director there. It's more on the basis of rather, what are we doing for speech data? Because I hear everyone is so focused on collecting text data to be able to give resources out, but what are you doing on speech data? Because someone came to our stand today and asked us, how do we then go to communities where people who hear Zulu but can't read Zulu can be able to be assisted in terms of health? Because it's a real struggle. It's there in text, but nothing audio is there for them. So I wanted to ask, what are we doing then to develop the audio part of data?
As the executive director of SADILA, I do have a former node manager who was specializing in speech data.
Thank you. But I think that this is part of the problem, is that we don't know what each other is doing. So at CSIR, we've been working on speech data and speech technology since 2003. It's 20 years, and it gives you grey hairs. But that was a joke, guys. Sorry, by now I thought you would understand my sense of humor. So we have speech recognition systems. We have speech recognition models for all of our African languages. We also have text-to-speech voices. And that is available publicly. One can purchase a voice for your phone, or you can contact us to integrate the voices into your solution or your offering. But it is a commercial offering called Qfluency. So you're welcome to go and have a look at the Qfluency.com website, and you'll see some of the stuff that we're doing there with regard to speech. But speech is obviously a major issue, and collecting speech and having speech become a resource that we use to bootstrap from to develop our languages is basically what we want to play in. And if you go down to the CSIR stand in the exhibition hall, there is an example there of an application that we have developed, and I really want to speak to Marlies more about that. but for education, for literacy development, for the foundation phase, and it integrates both our speech recognition and our text-to-speech technology. And you can see how it becomes available in action to actually help children to learn to write words, grammatically correct words, sentences, and to transfer meaning from one language into another language. So if you want to know anything about speech, Etla.
Thank you for that one, Karen. That's, I think, a very important contribution and to take note of. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I
Prof,
think... Yes.
Sorry, there is a question online. I think it's directed to Ubabu Soli. They're requesting that maybe if he can expand on the role of the term register and term bank. Yeah, that's the comment.
The role of the National Terminology Register is to encourage all terminology developers to register their projects with the department. I know this is one of the biggest challenges, because people, the moment they register a project, they take it for granted that the department is taking responsibility for everything. But the main reason we are encouraging people to register their projects, it's for us to share that information with whoever might come back at a later stage and say, I'm doing this project. So all we do, we redirect this person to the project that we are already aware of, so that they can work together to save resources, to avoid duplicating the same work that has already been done elsewhere. In terms of the National Term Bank, the role of the National Term Bank, it's to make sure that all completed projects are deposited. We don't take ownership. You deposit it in the National Term Bank so that we can save that information and make sure that anybody who is interested in knowing terminology related to a specific project can visit the National Term Bank. It's work in progress. The National Term Bank, it's not yet active. It's work in progress that we are hoping that as soon as it's final, it's fully functional, people will be able to log in and see all completed projects and search for terminology that they are interested in, so that they do their work more efficiently and effectively. I think I should stop here. Thank you.
Is it on? Thank you very much, Soli. So I think that we've come to the end of our event, of our discussion, of our presentations, of the questions and answers. Thank you very, very much for all the good engagement, interaction that we had, for your presence, for your interest, and I hope that it's the first time, or maybe even the second time that we've seen each other, but that we will continue these events and keep on talking about these things. Rome wasn't built in a day, and we just have to take it step by step. So I'd like to again thank my speakers for their preparation, for their profound contributions, all of you. For me, it was most interesting, and I really appreciate this. For the audience, for Karen, for asking all sorts of good questions, for everybody that asked good questions and that are interested in this space. And as I said before, it's our responsibility and it's our languages, and we have to, I think, use them. I think the most important thing is that we have to keep on using them in all the spaces that we occupy, because that will generate the momentum and that will generate all sorts of energy in different places. So thank you very much from my part, from Sadila's part. We want to say thank you very much and enjoy whatever you do, and keep going.